In one of the most well-known kidnappings of a white child by Native Americans, 11-year-old Jimmy McKinn was taken in 1885 and not recovered until the following year, 1886. A decade earlier, in 1875, all Apache living west of the Rio Grande were forced onto the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona, an arid, harsh stretch of land the soldiers called Hell's 40 Acres. Stripped of their territory, freedom, and proper provisions, many Apache bands, led by Geronimo, rose up in defiance. Crossing into Mexico, they waged sporadic raids on frontier settlements for nearly 10 years, alternating between uneasy peace and open war. By 1882, General George Crook was once again dispatched to Arizona to bring the hostiles under control. Geronimo finally surrendered in 1884, but escaped the following May, convinced he would be executed. With about 35 warriors and over 100 women and children, he crossed into New Mexico, striking isolated ranches as he moved. In September 1885, Geronimo's followers reached the McKinn Ranch in the Mimbres Valley. The rancher, John McKinn, was away in Las Cruces, leaving his wife, daughter, and 2 sons, 17-year-old Martin and 11-year-old Jimmy, known to locals as Santiago. While the boys were tending cattle, Geronimo's men appeared. They questioned Jimmy, then seized him and several horses. When Martin tried to intervene, Geronimo struck him in the head with a rock. Martin's body was found the next morning. Devastated, John McKinn pursued the Apache for 8 straight days, but returned with nothing. The loss broke him. His health and mind declined, and he never fully recovered before his death 12 years later. Early newspaper reports wrongly claimed that both boys had been killed. Later stories corrected the record, suggesting that Jimmy might still be alive, taken captive by Geronimo's band. At the time, such kidnappings were not unusual. Both native and Mexican raiders sometimes took children either as slaves or to raise as members of their tribes. By March 1886, General Crook's forces finally cornered Geronimo at Cañón de los Embudos in Sonora, Mexico. Among the captured group was young Jimmy McKinn. Present at the scene were reporter Charles Fletcher Lummis and photographer C.S. Fly, who documented the surrender. When told he would be sent home, Jimmy burst into tears, begging to remain with the Apache. He spoke fluent Apache, refused to use English or Spanish, and appeared completely assimilated into his new life. Before Crook's command could escort the prisoners back across the border, Geronimo and a small group of followers escaped again. Crook was soon replaced by General Nelson Miles, who took custody of Jimmy and the remaining captives. They were sent to Fort Bowie, Arizona. From there, Jimmy boarded a train to Deming, New Mexico, where he was reunited with his father on April 8, 1886. Sunburned, barefoot, and wary, the boy instantly recognized him. He later described his time in captivity. His brother Martin had been killed by Geronimo himself, and he had marched countless miles, often without food or sleep, surviving mostly on horse meat. Though the life was harsh, he said he had not been treated cruelly, and had even grown fond of his captors. Jimmy gave the army important details about the Apache's roots and habits. Locals celebrated his return, and a Deming merchant gifted him new clothes. Though he struggled to readjust to white society, he eventually settled in Grant County, New Mexico, became a blacksmith, and later moved to Phoenix, Arizona, where he reportedly died in the 1950s. As for Geronimo, his final surrender came in September 1886 at Skeleton Canyon. Imprisoned first in Florida and later at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, he became both a symbol of native resistance and a curiosity of his time. He died in 1909, still far from the homeland he had fought to defend, and lies buried at Fort Sill.